The general's laughter echoed across the officers' club terrace, sharp and dismissive beneath the California sunset. He'd spotted her immediately. The woman in worn leather at the bar's edge, gray threading through dark hair pulled back tight, weathered hands wrapped around a glass of neat whiskey. What caught his attention wasn't her age or her silence. It was the patch. Worn and faded on her jacket's back, the insignia showed a skeletal angel wreathed in flames, clutching a fighter jet instead of the traditional motorcycle. Below it, words that made him scoff. Hell's Angels, Sierra Victor Niner. He nudged the colonel beside him, pointing with his tumbler. Look at that. Some old biker chick trying to play fighter jock. Stolen valor, probably. His voice carried deliberately, meant to shame, meant to expose. The woman didn't turn, didn't flinch. Just lifted her glass in the mirror's reflection behind the bar, meeting his eyes with something cold and knowing before taking a slow drink. What the general didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that 23 years earlier, that same patch had been painted on the nose of an F-15E Strike Eagle screaming through Iraqi airspace at midnight. The woman's call sign wasn't chosen lightly. Sierra Victor stood for something the young pilots whispered about in ready rooms but never fully understood. It meant Silent Valkyrie. But those who'd flown with Captain Lucia Vadas knew it really meant something else entirely. She who decides who lives. The general continued his commentary, emboldened by his audience's nervous chuckles. Probably bought that jacket at some surplus store. These people, they think slapping on military-adjacent patches makes them special. His companions shifted uncomfortably, but protocol kept them silent. He was a two-star. He could say what he wanted. Behind them, an older colonel in blues had gone statue, still, his face draining of color as he recognized the patch's specific design. His hand trembled slightly as he set down his drink. He knew exactly who she was. He'd been there. March 7th, 2003, Operation Viking Hammer, when Sierra Victor Niner had done the impossible. The woman finally turned on her bar stool, movement economical and precise. Her eyes weren't angry. They were something worse. Tired. Patient. The look of someone who'd seen this particular brand of ignorance too many times to count. She reached into her jacket pocket slowly, withdrew something small, placed it on the bar with a soft click that somehow cut through every conversation in the room. It was a challenge coin. Black and silver, edges worn from years of handling. The general squinted at it from across the terrace, his smile beginning to fade as he registered the insignia. The seal of the United States Air Force Special Operations Command. The date engraved beneath it made his stomach drop, 2003. The woman stood, leather creaking in the sudden silence. When she spoke, her voice carried the kind of quiet authority that combat burns into certain people. General, you have no idea what you're looking at. 300 miles away, in a secure facility beneath Nellis Air Force Base, an encrypted message was being decoded. Subject line: regarding Captain Lucia Vadas, USAF Ret. The timing was coincidence. The content was not. Someone very important wanted to know if Sierra Victor Niner could still fly, if she could still make the impossible decisions. Because somewhere over the Pacific, something had gone terribly wrong, and the only pilot qualified to fix it had just been humiliated in a California bar by a man who thought patches told the whole story. He was about to learn that some patches are earned in blood and silence, where the only witnesses are radar screens and classified after-action reports that will stay sealed for 50 years. The woman picked up her challenge coin, pocketed it, and walked toward the general's table. Her limp was barely noticeable. Most people missed it entirely. Those who knew looked for the slight drag of her right leg, the souvenir from an ejection seat that had saved her life while destroying her knee. She'd refused medical retirement. Flown 18 more months before the Air Force finally grounded her, not for lack of skill, but because regulations don't bend for heroes, only for politicians. The bartender, an ex-Navy chief, recognized the look on the old colonel's face and quietly reached for the phone beneath the bar. Whatever was about to happen, somebody needed to document it, or stop it. He wasn't sure which. The general watched her approach, his smirk now uncertain, crystallizing into something defensive. His companions had gone quiet, reading the room's sudden tension the way career officers learn to sense incoming trouble. The old colonel in blue stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud against tile. "Sir," he said, voice tight with warning, but the general waved him off. "I don't know what you think you're doing," the general said to the approaching woman, trying to reclaim his authority through volume. "But you should know that stolen valor is a federal offense. That patch doesn't mean what you think it means." Lucia stopped 3 feet away, close enough that he could see the fine scars along her jawline, the slight discoloration that comes from high-altitude frostbite, close enough to smell the old leather and the ghost of jet fuel that never quite washes out. "You're absolutely right, General," she said quietly. "This patch doesn't mean what I think it means. It means exactly what happened, every single second of it." The old colonel tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. "General Thompson, sir, I strongly suggest." "Colonel, stand down." Thompson's face had gone red, pride and embarrassment fighting for dominance. He stood to match Lucia's height, though she still had 2 inches on him. "I don't care what you think you did. I don't care what stories you've told yourself. That insignia represents a unit that doesn't exist, doing operations that never happened, in a war that had nothing to do with fighter jets and bikers." Lucia smiled then, just a flicker at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't a kind expression. "You're right again, General. That unit doesn't exist. Those operations never happened, which is exactly why you should stop talking." She reached into her other pocket, slower this time, watching his hand twitch toward where a sidearm would be if he were in garrison. She pulled out a phone, battered, military-grade, the kind with triple encryption, held it up so he could see the screen. The message was brief. Sender, USSOCOM. Subject, immediate recall. Text only. Sierra Victor Niner, authenticate and report. Priority Alpha. Scramble authorization follows. The general's eyes widened as he parsed the military jargon, the authentication codes, the priority classification that meant someone very far above his pay grade had reached down into civilian life and pulled this woman back into whatever shadows she'd emerged from. Thompson was career military. 28 years. He knew what priority alpha meant. It meant the president's signature. It meant someone was dying or about to die, and conventional options had been exhausted. The phone buzzed again. Another message. This one made Lucia's jaw tighten, the only crack in her composure. She read it twice, her eyes hardening with each pass. Then she looked up at the general with something that might have been pity if it weren't so cold. "General Thompson, I suggest you remember this moment. Remember how you felt when you mocked an old woman in a bar for wearing patches you didn't understand. Because in approximately 6 hours, you're going to receive a classified briefing that explains exactly why I'm wearing this jacket, why this patch exists, and why certain people thought it was worth interrupting your evening to remind you that not everything in the military is about rank and protocol." She turned to leave, then paused, looked back over her shoulder. The Hells Angels part, that's not military, that's personal. From the men whose lives I saved when our entire formation got ambushed over Mosul. They gave me the patch because their motorcycle club and my fighter squadron had something in common. We both understood that loyalty isn't about rules. It's about who you die for. The terrace had gone completely silent. Every officer, every enlisted member, every contractor and civilian guest frozen in the moment's gravity. The old colonel was openly crying now, not with sadness but with something fierce and proud. He'd been there. He'd seen what Sierra Victor Niner had done when 12 American soldiers pinned down in a compound had called for air support. And the only plane in range was a single F-15E Strike Eagle with a pilot who wasn't supposed to be flying combat missions, because regulations said women didn't belong in direct action roles. Lucia Vadas had ignored those regulations spectacularly. She made 3-gun runs at altitudes so low her wingtips had clipped power lines, had stayed on station for 47 minutes past bingo fuel, past reserve, past every safety margin, providing cover fire with her cannon while insurgents lit up the sky with tracers and surface-to-air missiles. Had called in medevac coordinates while taking shrapnel through her canopy, blood running down her flight suit, vision blurring from hypoxia because her oxygen system had been compromised. She'd saved 11 of those 12 soldiers. The 12th had died in her arms after she'd landed at the forward operating base, refusing medical attention until she'd personally carried him off her damaged aircraft. His name was sewn on the inside of her jacket. Marcus Chen, 22 years old, from San Diego. He'd asked her to tell his mom he'd been brave. She'd done that. Then she'd gotten the Hell's Angels patch made, had it embroidered with her call sign, and wore it every day since retirement as a reminder that some oaths don't expire when you sign separation papers. The general stood rooted as Lucia walked away, her limp more pronounced now that adrenaline was fatting, the old injury announcing itself the way it always did when stress flooded her system. The bartender hung up his phone, having gotten through to the base commander at Nellie's, who'd apparently laughed and said, "If Sierra Victor Niner is back, something serious is happening. Don't interfere. Just let it play out." Outside, a black SUV was already waiting. Not coincidence. Never coincidence with operations at this level. Lucia climbed in, nodding to the young Air Force captain at the wheel, female fighter pilot wings, the look of someone who'd grown up hearing stories about legends who'd paved the way. The captain didn't speak, just drove, heading north toward the private airfield where a modified Gulfstream waited, engines already spooling. Inside, 3 people waited in the cabin. A Navy admiral Lucia had flown with during joint exercises in the 90s. A CIA analyst she'd worked with on operations she couldn't discuss, and a young woman in civilian clothes who looked absolutely terrified. "Captain Vadas," the admiral said, using her old rank because it mattered in this context. "Thank you for coming." "Didn't give me much choice," Lucia replied, settling into a seat that felt too comfortable after years of barstools and pickup truck benches. Priority Alpha means someone's about to die or start a war. Which is it? The analyst pulled up a screen, images flooding across, satellite footage, radar tracks, what looked like a shoot-down sequence over open ocean. "Both," she said quietly. "The Chinese intercepted one of our intelligence planes 6 hours ago, forced it down. Crew of 12 half-injured being held on a disputed island in the South China Sea. Beijing saying it's their territory. State Department saying otherwise. DOD wants to extract our people before this escalates." Lucia studied the footage, her mind already calculating angles, approach vectors, defensive patterns. "You have assets in theater." 2 carrier groups within range, the admiral said. "But sending in a strike package makes this a shooting war. China's already posturing. If we go loud, they go loud, and suddenly we're in World War III over 12 airmen and international waters nobody agrees on." "So you need quiet," Lucia said. "Fast, quiet, and with plausible deniability if it goes sideways." The young woman spoke for the first time, her voice steadier than her hands. "My brother's the pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Chen. Her voice broke. "They said you knew his uncle, that you carried him, that you'd understand." The name hit Lucia like turbulence. Marcus Chen. Different Marcus, same family, same courage bleeding through generations. She looked at the young woman, late 20s, eyes red from crying, wearing a Stanford sweatshirt that suggested education and normalcy suddenly shattered by geopolitics and crisis. "Your brother's uncle made me promise I'd look after the family," Lucia said carefully. "Tell me he's alive." "Last transmission was 4 hours ago," the analyst said. "Injuries but stable. Chinese military took them to a fortified position on Fiery Cross Reef. Technically artificial island, heavily defended, middle of nowhere. Extracting them conventionally means helicopters, which means they get shot down before they land. Means casualties. Means escalation." Lucia's mind was already working the problem, running calculations she'd thought were retired along with her wings. "What's the play?" The admiral leaned forward. We've got a pilot who claims she can do what you did over Mosul. Fly low, fast, under radar coverage, provide enough distraction for a SEAL team to hit the island from the water while everyone's looking up. It's insane. She'll be flying a stripped-down F-15X, no weapons except chaff and flares, relying entirely on speed and surprise. She'll have maybe 90 seconds over target before the Chinese light her up. He paused. She requested you as her backseater. Lucia stared at him. I'm retired, 52 years old, haven't flown combat in 20 years. She said you're the only weapons systems officer she'd trust not to panic when it goes bad, the Admiral replied. Said you've already proven you can fly a damaged bird home when the pilot's incapacitated. Said the story goes that you actually landed your own jet after your pilot ejected over hostile territory. That story's classified, Lucia said flatly. She has the clearance, the CIA analyst interjected. Captain Maya Reeves, call sign Phantom, top of her class at Nellie's, weapons school graduate, and she's obsessed with your career. Wrote her thesis on low-altitude interdiction tactics based on declassified versions of your missions. The Gulf Stream was climbing now, heading toward Nevada and whatever came next. Lucia felt the old pull, the mission need, the impossible ask, the calculation of risk versus reward that combat pilots learn to make in microseconds. She looked at Marcus Chen's niece, saw the desperation there, the hope pinned on a worn leather jacket and faded patches. Tell me about Phantom, Lucia said quietly. The Admiral smiled grimly. 31 years old, 200 hours in type, never seen combat, volunteers for every dangerous training scenario, pushes harder than anyone I've seen since you were active, and she's absolutely terrified she's not good enough, which is exactly the quality we need right now, someone who understands the stakes. Lucia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of years and choices settling back onto her shoulders like a familiar flight suit. She'd promised herself she was done. Done with the fear, the pressure, the impossible decisions where doing nothing meant people died, but doing something meant risking everything. She'd promised Marcus Chen's mother she'd never put herself in danger again, that one life given for the family was enough. But promises have weight only when they're kept in context. And context was 12 American airmen on a Chinese military installation, a young pilot who needed wisdom she didn't have yet, and a mission so dangerous that they'd pulled a retired legend out of a bar because conventional options had already failed. What's the timeline? Lucia asked, eyes still closed. Wheels up in 4 hours, the Admiral said. You'll meet Phantom at Guam, mission brief during flight, hit the target at dawn local time. Chinese will be rotating shifts, least alert. Weather's marginal, low clouds, which helps with radar but makes visual flying dangerous as hell. You'll have maybe 90 seconds from first approach to SEAL insertion. After that, you're on your own getting out. And if we're shot down? The silence answered that question. No extraction, no rescue. Plausible deniability meant they'd deny everything, claim it was a rogue operation, hang them out to dry diplomatically while working back channels to get them home. Standard protocol for black ops that technically didn't exist. Lucia opened her eyes, looked at each person in the cabin. I need to know something first. Is this about the airmen, or is this about sending China a message? Because I won't risk Captain Reeves' life for a political statement. The Admiral held her gaze. It's about bringing Americans home. That's the only mission. State Department and DOD are handling the message separately. This is purely extraction, nothing more. Lucia nodded slowly, stood up despite her protesting knee, walked to the window where dawn was beginning to paint the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere out there, a young woman named Phantom was probably running through pre-flight checks, trying to manage her terror, wondering if the legend she'd studied would actually show up, or if this was some kind of test she was failing before it started. Tell Phantom I'll be there, Lucia said, and tell her the first thing she needs to understand about impossible missions. They're only impossible until someone does them. After that, they're just dangerous. Marcus Chen's niece started crying again, this time with relief. The Admiral allowed himself a small smile. The CIA analyst made notes, already preparing the after-action report she'd have to write regardless of outcome. And Lucia Vadas, Sierra Victor Niner, the silent Valkyrie who'd once decided who lived and died in the skis over Iraq, felt the old familiar weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders one more time. She'd thought she was done, thought she'd earned her retirement, her quiet life, her freedom from impossible choices. But some debts transcend retirement. Some promises echo across generations. And some patches aren't just symbols. They're reminders that once you earn the right to decide who lives, you never really stop carrying that burden. The Gulfstream banked toward Nevada, toward Nellie's, toward whatever classified briefing would fill in the operational details. Lucia returned to her seat, accepted coffee from the young captain who'd driven her, and pulled out her phone. She had messages to send, people to notify, a will to update just in case. Not pessimism, just the professional acknowledgement that combat aviation at 52 was exponentially more dangerous than at 29. Her last message was to the general, brief, simple, not gloating because she'd never been that type of officer, just factual. General Thompson, the patch is real. The operations were real. The men I saved were real. And tomorrow morning I'm going to do it again because someone's brother needs to come home. Sierra Victor Niner sends. She didn't expect a reply, didn't need one. The point wasn't to humiliate him. It was to remind him that judgment should be earned, not assumed. That some people wear their credentials on the inside, written in scars and classified files and memories that wake them screaming some nights. The Gulfstream climbed higher, chasing the sun westward toward Guam, and a meeting with a pilot young enough to be her daughter, terrified enough to be honest, and skilled enough to maybe pull off what every simulation said was impossible. Lucia finished her coffee, closed her eyes, and let muscle memory pull her back into the pre-mission mindset. Breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The fear was still there, would always be there. But it was managed now, compartmentalized, stored in the same mental boxes where she kept every other impossible thing she'd survived. Outside, the sun climbed higher, indifferent to human drama. Inside, a legend prepared to become operational again, wondering if 20 years had stolen too much speed, too much edge, too much of whatever indefinable quality separated those who survived from those who didn't. In 6 hours, she'd have her answer. Until then, there was only the flight, the mission brief, and the strange comfort of knowing that some skills never quite disappear. They just sleep quietly until someone needs them desperately enough to risk waking them up. The general back in California stood alone on the terrace, staring at Lucia's message on his phone. Around him, the party had resumed, but quietly, subdued by the earlier confrontation. The old colonel approached carefully, stood beside him in silence for a moment before speaking. "Sir, if I may, Captain Vadas is the real thing. What she did over Mosul. I was in the CAOC that night. Watched the whole thing on screens. She should have died 3 times, kept flying anyway. We gave her the Distinguished Flying Cross. She handed it back, said give it to Chen's mother. Said she didn't earn medals, she just did her job." Thompson looked at his subordinate, really looked, seeing past rank and protocol to the raw emotion underneath. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because most of it's classified, sir, and because she doesn't talk about it. Those patches, she wears them so she remembers, not so we will." The general pocketed his phone, feeling a strange mix of shame and respect that he'd need time to process. If she pulls this off, whatever this is, I owe her an apology. "Sir," the colonel said gently, "I don't think she'll care. People like Captain Vadas don't keep score. They just keep serving whether we recognize it or not." Thompson nodded slowly, staring out at the darkness where somewhere a legend was flying toward another impossible mission. He'd spent 28 years climbing ranks, earning stars, building a career on protocol and regulations. And in one conversation, A retired captain in a biker jacket had reminded him that some things matter more than rank. He'd remember this lesson, would carry it forward, would think twice before judging patches and people he didn't understand. But first, he'd wait for the classified briefing he'd been told was coming, wait to learn what Sierra Victor Niner was about to do, wait to see if legends could fly twice in one lifetime. The California night settled deep and quiet. Inside the officers' club, drinks were poured and conversations resumed, but everyone present would remember this evening, would tell the story, carefully, respecting classifications. About the night, a general learned humility from a woman in leather. And somewhere over the Pacific, Lucia Vadas flew toward dawn and danger, carrying the weight of other people's lives one more time, wondering if her body could still handle what her mind remembered, if her nerve would hold when the Chinese opened fire, if Phantom would stay cool under pressure or freeze at the crucial moment. All questions that would be answered soon, all fears that couldn't be managed, only endured. The mission clock was ticking, and Sierra Victor Niner was running out of time to prepare for the impossible. Guam appeared through scattered clouds as the Gulf Stream began its descent, the island's lights marking civilization's edge before vast Pacific darkness. The Anderson Air Force Base runway gleamed with approach lights, and Lucia could see the massive hangars where strategic bombers slept between missions. Somewhere down there, Phantom was waiting, probably packing, probably second-guessing everything, probably terrified in the way only combat virgins understand. The landing was smooth, professional, unremarkable, as it should be. Lucia deplaned into humid tropical air that smelled of salt and jet fuel, the familiar scent triggering memories she'd thought were safely buried. A colonel met them on the tarmac, older, competent-looking, the kind of officer who ran operations without needing spotlight or credit. "Captain Vadas, I'm Colonel Martinez, Operations Commander. Welcome back to the fight." He didn't salute, she was retired, technically civilian, but his tone carried the respect. "Captain Reeves is in Hangar 7 with the bird. We've got 3 hours until launch. Medical cleared you." "I cleared myself," Lucia said dryly. "At my age, waiting for official clearance means I'm already dead." Martinez almost smiled. "Follow me. We'll brief during the walk. Mission parameters are tight, margin for error is non-existent, and frankly, half the brass thinks this is suicide. The other half thinks it's merely insane." "Which half do you belong to?" Lucia asked, falling into step beside him. "The half that thinks if anyone can pull this off, it's Sierra Victor Niner and the pilot who studied every mission you've ever flown." He glanced at her. "For what it's worth, Captain, having you here changes the calculus. Reeves is brilliant but inexperienced. You bring something simulations can't teach." "I bring 20 years of rust and a bad knee," Lucia countered. "You bring the understanding that luck isn't random, that survival is a skill, that impossible is just a word people use before someone proves them wrong." Martinez stopped at the hangar entrance, his expression serious. "These kids today, Reeves, her generation, they've trained in peacetime, never had to make the choice between mission and life, never had to fly through hell and keep flying because people on the ground are counting seconds until they die. You have. That matters more than rust." Inside Hangar 7, the F-15X sat like a coiled predator, matte gray paint designed to scatter radar, hardpoints empty except for ECM pods and chaff dispensers. Stripped down for speed, no weapons except electronic countermeasures and hope. A suicide plane for a suicide mission, dressed up in tactical language so everyone could pretend it was routine. Beneath the aircraft, a woman in a flight suit was performing pre-flight checks, moving with mechanical precision that spoke of nerves channeled into procedure. She looked up as they approached, and Lucia got her first real look at Phantom. Captain Maya Reeves was smaller than expected, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that held too much intelligence and not enough sleep. She snapped to attention automatically, then seemed to remember Lucia was retired and relaxed slightly, though tension still radiated from every line of her body. "Captain Vadas," Reeves said, voice carefully controlled. "Thank you for coming. I know this is irregular." "Irregular is asking someone to backseater a combat mission at 52, Lucia replied. "This is insane. Let's be honest about what we're doing here." Reeves blinked, thrown off by the bluntness. "Ma'am, Don't call me ma'am. I work for a living, or used to. Call me Vadas or Sierra Victor, depending on formality level." Lucia walked around the aircraft, running experienced eyes over modifications and specifications. "Talk to me about the mission profile. Real version, not the sanitized briefing." Reeves took a breath, shifted mental gears, became all business. "We launch in 2 hours 50 minutes. Flight time to target is 93 minutes at cruise, longer if we hit weather. We'll approach from the east, using a commercial shipping lane for radar camouflage until final approach. At 20 miles out, we drop to 200 feet, run in at 600 knots. Chinese radar coverage is sophisticated. We're counting on speed and low altitude to minimize detection time." "What's the air defense layout?" Lucia asked, inspecting the ECM pod. 3 SA-21 batteries on Fiery Cross Reef, full coverage overlapping. 6 J-20 fighters on rotation from Hainan Island, approximately 14 minutes response time from scramble alert. We have networked early warning, but it's Chinese domestic technology. We don't have full specifications." Lucia nodded, parsing the tactical situation. "So we're flying into integrated air defense with incomplete intelligence, no weapons, and hopping where fast enough that they miss. What's the distraction plan?" "We are the distraction," Reeves said quietly. "SEAL team launches from submarine 30 seconds after we're detected. They need 90 seconds to hit the beach, breach the facility, and extract the crew. We keep Chinese eyes on the sky during that window. And then we run like hell and hope we're faster than their missiles." Reeves met Lucia's eyes. "I won't lie to you, simulations give us maybe 40% survival probability. Less if they scramble those J-20s before we're out of range." "Simulations are worthless," Lucia said flatly. "They can't account for confusion, hesitation, the human tendency to second-guess sensor data that doesn't make sense. We're going to do things that don't make tactical sense, which means their doctrine won't have immediate answers. That buys us seconds. Seconds are what we need." Reeves absorbed this, nodding slowly. "The old Mosul playbook, make them question what they're seeing." "There is no playbook," Lucia corrected gently. "There's adaptation, improvisation, and the willingness to break every rule when rules will get you killed. You ready for that?" "I don't know," Reeves admitted, the honesty stark and surprising. "I've trained for this, dreamed about it, but actually doing it, knowing people die if I screw up, I don't know if I'm ready." Lucia stepped closer, looked up slightly at the younger woman, saw herself 23 years ago, competent, prepared, and absolutely terrified of failure. "Good," she said softly. "Fear means you understand the stakes. Cocky pilots die young. Scared pilots who fly anyway become legends. You're going to be fine." "How do you know?" "Because you asked for me," Lucia said simply. "Confident pilots want yes men. Smart pilots want someone who will tell them when they're wrong. You requested a backseater who's old, retired, and has a reputation for not suffering fools. That tells me you value truth over comfort. We'll fly well together." The tension in Reeves' shoulders eased fractionally. Not gone, wouldn't be gone until the mission was complete, but manageable now, channeled into purpose rather than paralysis. Colonel Martinez approached with a tablet. "Final briefing in 30 minutes. Intel update just came through. The crew's been moved to the central facility. Harder to extract but better protected from Chinese interrogation. They know we're coming. Don't know when or how, but they know. Chen sent a coded message this morning. Said to tell his sister not to worry and to tell Sierra Victor Niner that his uncle would be proud." Lucia's jaw tightened. The weight of legacy, of promises echoing across generations, of men who trusted her with their lives and then trusted her with their families' lives. It never got easier, never stopped hurting in that deep place where responsibility lived. "We'll bring him home," Lucia said, though she knew better than to make promises combat might break. "All of them, or we won't come back either." Martinez nodded, understanding the implicit contract. Combat pilots lived by certain codes. You didn't leave people behind. You didn't quit until you were dead or victorious. You didn't make excuses, just results. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of briefings, equipment checks, and final preparations. Lucia was fitted with a flight suit that felt strange after years of civilian clothes, the Nomex material stiff and unfamiliar against skin that had grown soft in retirement. The helmet was new, updated with technology that hadn't existed during her active duty, but the basic geometry was the same. The human head hadn't changed shape in 20 years. In the ready room, the full mission brief unfolded on screens. Satellite imagery showed fiery Cross Reef in painful detail, artificial island built on coral reef, 3 square kilometers of military installation masquerading as civilian infrastructure. The American crew was being held in a reinforced structure near the center, surrounded by barracks, vehicle parks, and defensive positions. "The SEAL team will insert here," the intelligence officer indicated, pointing to a beach on the eastern side. "They'll have exactly 90 seconds from detection to extraction. After that, Chinese reinforcements arrive and the whole thing becomes a shooting war. Your job is to keep their attention skyward, make them think you're the main threat, give the SEALs their window." "What about exfil?" Reeves asked. "The SEALs, I mean." "Fast boats from the submarine, rendezvous point 12 miles east. They'll be exposed for approximately 4 minutes during extraction. Again, you keep Chinese eyes on the sky. They might not notice the surface activity until it's too late." Lucia studied the map, calculating angles and timing. "What's our egress route?" "North initially, then west once you're out of SAM range. Aerial refueling rendezvous point here." Another dot appeared, approximately 200 miles west. KC-135 will be waiting. After that, straight back to Guam. "If we make the tanker," Lucia said. "If you make the tanker," the officer agreed. "Captain Vadas, I'd be lying if I said this wasn't dangerous as hell. The Joint Chiefs approved it because conventional extraction has 0 probability of success. This has 40%. Those odds are good enough when the alternative is leaving Americans to Chinese interrogation." 40%. Lucia had flown missions with worse odds. The Mosul run had been maybe 20%, though nobody had calculated it at the time. Sometimes you flew because people needed you to fly, and probability was just numbers on paper that didn't account for skill, determination, and willingness to push past limits that safe people respected. Reeves was quiet during the brief, absorbing everything, asking technical questions about radar coverage and missile ranges. Good questions, smart questions, the kind that would keep them alive if they paid attention to the answers. As the briefing concluded, Lucia caught Reeves' eye, gave her a slight nod. The younger woman nodded back, and in that silent exchange they became crew. Not friends yet, friendship required survival, but crew. Bound by mission and mutual dependence and the understanding that in approximately 90 minutes they'd strap into an aircraft and do something that would either be remembered as heroic or forgot as a failed black operation nobody would acknowledge. The walk to the aircraft felt longer than it was. Suited up, carrying helmets and survival gear, moving with the controlled urgency of professionals approaching the moment where preparation ended and execution began. Around them, ground crew made final checks, fuel trucks disconnected, weapons specialists verified ECM pods were functioning. Lucia paused at the boarding ladder, looked up at the F-15X's predatory lines. Modern technology wrapped around basic principles that hadn't changed since jets first broke the sound barrier. Thrust, lift, drag, and the courage to push past safety margins that kept normal people alive. "You ready?" Reeves asked beside her. Lucia turned, saw the fear and determination warring in the younger woman's eyes. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm going anyway. That's what ready means at our level, doing it despite the fear, not without it." They climbed into the cockpit, the two-seat configuration allowing Lucia the weapons systems officer position behind Reeves. The familiar ritual of strapping in, connecting oxygen, checking systems. Muscle memory taking over where conscious thought might falter. Hands moving through checklist items with precision born from thousands of repetitions across decades. Reeves' voice came through the intercom, calm and professional. "Sierra Victor, checklist complete, ready for engine start." "Copy," Lucia replied. "Start engines, let's go get those people back." The engines whined to life, building from whisper to roar as turbofans spooled up, raw power barely contained by titanium and engineering. The aircraft trembled, eager, ready to fly. Around them, ground crew cleared away, gave thumbs up, released them to their mission. Reeves taxied smoothly, confident in her handling, the big fighter responding precisely to inputs. At the runway threshold, she ran final checks, her breathing steady in Lucia's headset. No panic, no hesitation, just focus. "Tower Phantom 1-1, ready for takeoff." "Phantom 1-1 Tower, winds calm, clear for takeoff. Godspeed." Reeves pushed throttles forward, the afterburners igniting with a kick that pressed them back into seats. The runway blurred past, speed building impossibly fast, and then they were airborne, climbing into tropical night sky where stars glittered indifferent to human drama unfolding below. Lucia watched instruments, monitoring systems, but part of her attention was on the horizon where dawn would break in a few hours. Right about the time they'd be making their attack run over heavily defended Chinese territory with no weapons, no backup, and nothing but speed and surprise to keep them alive. The mission clock was running, 93 minutes to target, 90 seconds over the reef, then escape or death. In the back seat, Sierra Victor Niner checked her systems one more time, found them nominal, and settled into the old familiar state of combat readiness. Alert but calm, prepared but not tense, ready to make impossible decisions if the moment demanded it. She'd been here before, would probably be here again assuming they survived. For now, there was only the flight, the mission, and the promise she'd made to Marcus Chen's ghost 20 years ago, that his sacrifice wouldn't be wasted, that the people worth saving would be saved, that someone would always stand between darkness and those who couldn't stand for themselves. Reeves broke the silence, approaching commercial shipping lane, descending to cruise altitude, time to target 90 minutes. "Copy," Lucia replied. "Stay smooth, stay alert. When it starts, it'll happen fast." "How fast?" "Fast enough that thinking will get you killed. Trust your training, trust your instincts, and trust me when I tell you to do something that sounds insane." "Roger that," Reeves said, and despite the tension, there was a hint of a smile in her voice. "Flying with a legend. My instructors would be jealous." "Your instructors would be smart enough to stay on the ground," Lucia countered. "We're the ones dumb enough to volunteer for this." They flew on into darkness, two women separated by generation and experience, but united by mission and the strange alchemy that turns individuals into crew. Below them, the Pacific stretched vast and empty. Ahead, somewhere beyond the horizon, 12 Americans waited for rescue they didn't know was coming. And on Fiery Cross Reef, Chinese radar operators stared at screens, watching for threats, never suspecting that two women in an unarmed fighter were about to become the most dangerous thing in their sky. The crossing took forever and no time at all, minutes bleeding together in the timeless space of flight where nothing changes except position and fuel state. Lucia monitored their progress on navigation displays, watching the distance to target count down with mechanical precision. They'd picked up the commercial shipping lane perfectly, their radar signature lost among cargo vessels plodding across Pacific trade routes. Contact, Reeves announced suddenly. Airborne radar, 11 o'clock high, Chinese AWACS looks like. They're sweeping the area but haven't locked us yet. Lucia checked her scope, saw the radar emission signature painting their threat display. KJ-500 probably, China's eye in the sky, capable of tracking dozens of targets simultaneously. Stay cool. We're just another cargo plane until we're not. Maintain heading and speed. Copy, fuel state looks good. We'll hit the tanker window with reserves. Assuming we get that far, Lucia said. Not pessimism, just realism. Combat planning required acknowledging failure possibilities, working them into decision matrices, staying flexible when the plan inevitably fell apart. The radar sweep passed over them again, longer this time, the AWACS trying to correlate their signature against known traffic. Lucia watched the frequency changes, the pulse patterns, reading the Chinese operators' thought process through electronic signals. They were curious but not alarmed, still operating in peacetime protocols, expecting commercial traffic, not infiltration. That would change violently in about 40 minutes. Sierra Victor, Reeves said quietly, can I ask you something? Make it quick. Masool, when you made that run when everything went bad, how did you decide to stay? How did you know it was worth it? Lucia was quiet for a moment, remembering, blood on her canopy, alarms screaming, fuel gauge dropping past minimums, radio calls from the ground, desperate men begging for cover they didn't think was coming. I didn't decide, she said finally. Decision implies choice. There wasn't choice, just consequence. Stay and maybe save them, maybe die trying. Leave and definitely watch them die. Math was simple. But you had family, people who needed you to come home. Those soldiers had family too. They had kids who needed fathers, parents who needed sons. My dying wouldn't bring them back if I'd left, but staying gave them a chance. Lucia checked their position, saw they were approaching the decision point. You're asking the wrong question, Phantom. You're asking if it's worth dying for strangers. You should be asking if it's worth living knowing you could have saved them but chose safety instead. Reeves absorbed this in silence. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. Thank you for coming, for doing this again. I know retirement is a myth, Lucia interrupted. For people like us anyway, we don't retire from giving a damn. We just stop getting paid for it. Now focus. We're 25 minutes from the line. After that, we're committed. The night was lightening at the horizon, false dawn painting the sky in shades of indigo and gray. Below, the Pacific began to reveal itself, no longer featureless black but textured with swells and whitecaps. Beautiful and deadly, like most things in combat aviation. At 15 minutes out, Lucia began her own pre-flight checking weapons systems that weren't there, verifying ECM pods were ready to deploy, running through emergency procedures in her mind. Ejection sequence, water survival, capture protocol if they went down over Chinese territory. That last one was worst case, the scenario nobody talked about but everyone understood. Being shot down was survivable. Being captured by China during an illegal infiltration mission meant years of interrogation, international incident, political leveraging. The kind of fate that made death look almost preferable. 10 minutes, Reeves announced. Beginning descent to attack altitude. This is your last chance to tell me I'm crazy. You're crazy, Lucia confirmed. So am I, so is everyone involved in this operation. Sanity is overrated when Americans need extraction. They dropped from cruise altitude, the altimeter unwinding rapidly as Reeves pushed the nose over into a controlled dive. At 5,000 feet, she pulled level, then continued descending in steps, 3,000, 1,500. The water rushed up to meet them, gray and forbidding in pre-dawn light. At 200 feet, Reeves leveled off, the aircraft now screaming across wave tops at 600 knots, so low that spray from swells left moisture on the canopy. This was dangerous flying, the kind where mistakes meant instant death, no time for recovery, no margin for error. the kind that separated professionals from everyone else. 5 minutes to target, Reeves said, her voice tight with concentration, lighting up the Chinese radar in 3, 2, 1. The threat display exploded with contacts, multiple radar sources painting them, acquisition signals from SAM batteries, fighter control frequency going active. Every Chinese sensor on Fiery Cross Reef suddenly aware that something was approaching at high speed, low altitude, with a radar signature that didn't match anything commercial. Missile lock, Lucia called out, watching threat icons cascade across her display. SA-21 battery bearing 090, they're tracking. Deploying countermeasures, Reeves responded calmly, punching chaff and flare release. Come on, look at me. That's right, keep starring up here. On Fiery Cross Reef, alarms were screaming, officers shouting into radios, fighter pilots sprinting to J-20s waiting on alert status. And somewhere in that chaos, a SEAL team was approaching the beach in high-speed boats, counting on confusion and misdirection to get them ashore undetected. 2 minutes to overflight, Reeves announced. They're scrambling fighters. I see runway lights, aircraft taxiing. Ignore them, Lucia commanded. Stay on profile. SEALs need 90 seconds. The missile warning tone went solid, indicating launch. SA-21 in the air, Lucia called. Evasive action. Reeves broke hard left, the G-force crushing them into seats, world spinning as the fighter carved through sky with knife-edge precision. The missile streaked past, unable to track their sudden maneuver at this altitude, detonating harmlessly 300 meters away. Shrapnel pattered against their airframe like deadly rain. Damage report, Reeves asked, pulling level again. None critical, keep flying. Lucia was watching multiple displays simultaneously, threat radar, mission timer, SEAL team position transmitted via encrypted link. 60 seconds until extraction complete. They're at the facility. Another missile launch, this one closer. The SA-21 operators getting smarter about lead calculations. Reeves rolled inverted, diving toward the water, then pulled up at the last second, the missile unable to follow, exploding in the ocean below them in a geyser of white spray. Getting hot up here, Reeves muttered, her hands dancing across controls, flying the fighter through three-dimensional chess game where every move was life or death. Lucia checked the SEAL team frequency. Extraction in progress, they have the crew, moving to exfil point. How long? 45 seconds until they're clear. Fighters airborne, Reeves reported. J-20s climbing fast. They'll intercept in 2 minutes if we don't move. 30 seconds, Lucia said, watching the mission clock. Hold position. Another missile launch. Another evasive maneuver, this one closer. The proximity fuse detonating near enough that the blast wave rocked their aircraft. Warning lights illuminated across the panel. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Right engine running hot. Fuel leak detected. We're hit, Reeves said, voice still steady despite the emergency. Right engine compromised. Fuel dropping fast. 20 seconds, Lucia counted. Hold. Sierra Victor, if we don't break now, those fighters will catch us before we reach the tanker. 15 seconds. On the ground, SEAL Team 5 was carrying wounded Americans toward waiting boats, moving with controlled urgency while Chinese guards finally realized the main attack wasn't from the sky but from the beach. Gunfire erupted, tracers cutting through dawn light, but the SEALs were professionals, covering their withdrawal with precision fire and smoke grenades. 10 seconds, Lucia said. Prepare to egress. J-20s have lock, Reeves warned. They're firing. 5 seconds, 4, 3. The encrypted channel crackled. Sierra Victor, this is SEAL Team 5. Package secure. We are clear. Get out of there. Break north, Lucia commanded. Full afterburner. Reeves slammed throttles forward, the wounded right engine screaming in protest, the left engine providing just enough thrust to accelerate. They clawed for altitude and distance, every second carrying them farther from the reef, farther from the J-20s now turning to pursue. Chinese missiles streaked after them, PL-15s designed to kill at long range. Reeves deployed every countermeasure they had, chaff clouds and flare streams painting the sky behind them, confusing seeker heads, buying precious seconds. "Right engine's dead," Reeves announced, shutting it down before it could catch fire. "We're on one engine. Can't outrun those J-20s like this." Lucia was already calculating, running numbers in her head. Distance to tanker, 180 miles. Speed on one engine, 400 knots maximum. Chinese fighters, capable of 900 knots. Math was brutal and simple. They couldn't make it. "How much fuel?" Lucia asked. 30 minutes at cruise, less if we try to run." "Then we don't run, we hide." Reeves glanced at her scope, confused. "Hide where? We're over open ocean, they've got radar lock." "Descend to 50 feet, Lucia interrupted. "Right now, drop us into the wave tops and cut speed to 300 knots. That's insane, they'll catch us." "Trust me." Reeves didn't hesitate further, pushing the nose over into another controlled dive, this one taking them dangerously close to the water. At 50 feet, spray from waves kissed their belly, and Reeves throttled back, their speed dropping precipitously. On the Chinese radars, their signature suddenly degraded, mixing with sea return, becoming hard to track. The J-20s, closing at high speed and high altitude, overshot, their radar systems optimized for high-altitude intercepts, struggling to maintain lock on a target barely above the ocean surface. "They're turning," Reeves said, watching the threat display, "trying to reacquire." "They won't," Lucia said with confidence born from experience. "Their doctrine says we're trying to run. They'll expect us to climb, gain speed, try to reach the tanker. They're not trained to think we'd slow down and hide in ground clutter." She was right. The J-20s circled overhead, radar emissions sweeping the area, but unable to definitively separate their target from the chaotic radar returns bouncing off ocean swells. After 5 minutes of fruitless searching, they turned back toward base, low on fuel themselves, assuming their quarry had escaped northward. "They're gone," Reeves confirmed, unable to keep the disbelief from her voice. "That actually worked." "For now," Lucia cautioned. "But we're still damaged, still low on fuel, still a long way from safety. What's our fuel state?" 22 minutes at current burn rate. Tanker is 35 minutes away at this speed." The math was impossible. They couldn't make it. Even flying perfectly, they'd flame out 13 minutes short of salvation. Reeves did the calculation herself, came to the same conclusion. "We're not going to make it," she said quietly. "No," Lucia agreed, "not both of us." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Reeves understood immediately what Lucia was suggesting. "Absolutely not. We both get out or neither of us do." "That's nobility talking, not tactics," Lucia said calmly. "We have one ejection seat, 2 people, not enough fuel for both, but enough for one if we reduce weight and drag." "You want me to eject, leave you to fly this alone?" "I want you to survive," Lucia corrected. "I'm 52 years old, retired, lived a full career. You're 31 with your whole life ahead. Math is simple." "That's not how this works." "It's exactly how this works. Your survival serves mission objectives, proving extraction was possible, providing post-mission intelligence, returning a combat-capable pilot to service. My survival serves ego. I've already done my part. Time for you to do yours." Reeves' hands tightened on the controls, knuckles white with fury and helplessness. "I will not eject. I will not leave you up here alone. That's final." Lucia had expected this response. Planned for it, even. Which was why she'd already quietly armed the canopy jettison sequence, already calculated the timing, already made the decision that regulations and command authority couldn't make. "Phantom," she said softly, You're a good pilot, going to be a great one, but you're still thinking like this is training where everyone gets saved. This is combat. Someone always pays the price. Today it's me. Tomorrow you'll train the next generation, teach them what impossible looks like, make sure my sacrifice means something. Sierra Victor, please. Lucia triggered the canopy jettison. The explosive bolts fired, the canopy separating from airframe, wind howling into the cockpit with physical force. Reeves screamed something, protest, curse, plea, but it was lost in the roar. Then Lucia triggered the ejection sequence, not her own seat but Reeves, the override command that pilots feared for exactly this reason. The rocket motor fired, and Captain Maya Reeves was suddenly airborne, separated from her aircraft, tumbling through space while below her, Sierra Victor Niner took sole control of the dying F-15X. The chute deployed automatically, orange and white canopy blossoming against blue sky. Reeves hung suspended, watching her aircraft level out and continue north, powered by a single engine and piloted by a woman who'd just chosen death to give her life. No, Reeves screamed into her radio, knowing it was pointless. Sierra Victor, abort, come back. But Lucia's voice came back calm and final. Rescue beacon shows you 20 miles from that submarine. They'll pick you up. Tell Marcus Chen's niece her brother's safe. Tell my family I went out flying. And Phantom, next time someone offers you a suicide mission, remember today. Remember that some people choose to pay the price so others don't have to. Don't do this, Reeves begged. Please, we can figure something out. Already figured out. This is the answer. Fly safe, Phantom. You're going to do great things. The radio went silent. Below, the ocean rushed up to meet Reeves, cold and vast and indifferent. She splashed down hard, the impact jarring but survivable, and then she was bobbing in Pacific swells, watching a tiny speck on the horizon that represented her aircraft and its pilot flying toward death with the same calm competence she'd shown throughout the mission. Lucia flew alone now, the cockpit strange and quiet without Reeves breathing in her headset. The fuel gauge was dropping into reserve, the single engine drinking every drop, but she had enough. Just barely enough for what she needed to do. She climbed slowly, gaining altitude, burning precious fuel to position herself. At 15,000 feet, she leveled off and checked her watch. 12 minutes of fuel remaining, maybe less. The tanker was still 10 minutes away, and she couldn't make that distance. But she could make the news. Lucia switched to guard frequency, the emergency channel monitored by everyone in this airspace, Chinese, American, civilian traffic. When she spoke, her voice was clear and calm, the voice of someone making final decisions without regret. Any station. This is United States Air Force Captain Lucia Vadas, call sign Sierra Victor Niner, flying solo in a damaged F-15X approximately 140 miles east of Chinese territorial waters. I am declaring an emergency. Fuel state is critical. I will not be able to maintain flight for more than 10 minutes. This message is being broadcast to confirm that United States forces conducted no offensive operations against Chinese installations. Our mission was strictly humanitarian extraction of American personnel held against international law. I repeat, no offensive action was taken. We were defending Americans exercising their right to transit international waters. She paused, let that sink in for monitoring stations across the region. The political message delivered, now the personal one. To my family, I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise about not doing this again. To Captain Maya Reeves, call sign Phantom, you did everything right. This was my choice, not your failure. To the United States Air Force, it has been my honor to serve. And to anyone listening who thinks old women in leather jackets can't be warriors, check your assumptions. They might save your life someday. The fuel warning light went red, then steady. Engine flame out in 60 seconds. Lucia aimed for the water, shallow dive angle, calculating impact forces in her head. Too steep and she'd die instantly. Too shallow and she'd cartwheel, same result. There was a narrow window where she might survive the impact, might make it to her life raft, might get rescued before hypothermia or sharks finished what Chinese missiles couldn't. But she wasn't counting on it, wasn't even hopping for it really. She'd made peace with this outcome the moment she'd ejected Reeves. Some debts you pay with your body, some promises you keep with your life. The engine coughed, starving for fuel. Lucia disconnected her oxygen mask, wanting to breathe real air one last time before the end. The cockpit smelled like jet fuel and hydraulic fluid, and 23 years of service compressed into final seconds. She thought about Marcus Chen, the first one, the boy who died in her arms. Thought about his niece, safe now because Lucia had done it again, had paid the price again. Thought about Reeves splashing down in Pacific swells, probably crying, probably hatting her, definitely alive. Good enough. The engine quit entirely. Sudden silence except for wind howling through the empty canopy frame. The aircraft began dropping, gliding now, trading altitude for time. She had maybe 3 minutes before impact. Lucia used them well. Thought about her parents, long dead, waiting somewhere if physics was wrong and spirits were real. Thought about every student she'd trained, every mission she'd flown, every impossible thing she'd made possible through will and skill and refusal to quit. She thought about that bar in California, the general who'd mocked her, the patches on her jacket that told stories nobody understood. She wondered if he'd gotten his briefing yet, if he knew what Sierra Victor Niner had done this morning, if he'd remember to check his assumptions next time. She hoped so. Hoped her death taught him something valuable about judgment and service, and the warriors who walk quietly among civilians until called back to war one final time. The water was close now, dark and cold and waiting. Lucia pulled back gently on the stick, flaring for impact, giving herself every possible chance. The F-15X kissed the ocean's surface almost delicately, then physics took over, crushing deceleration, metal tearing, canopy frame collapsing, water forcing itself into every space with brutal indifference. Lucia felt ribs crack, felt consciousness trying to flee, held onto it through will alone. She'd survived the impact. Step 1 complete. Now came the hard part, escaping the sinking aircraft before it dragged her to the bottom. She released harness straps with numb fingers, pushed against the crushed frame, squeezed through impossible spaces. The aircraft was filling rapidly, cold water rising, and she was tangled in something, cable, fabric, she couldn't tell. Panic tried to surface, the biological terror of drowning, but she pushed it down with the same discipline that had kept her flying through fire over Mosul. One hand free, then the other, pushing up, swimming toward light that seemed impossibly far away, lungs burning, vision narrowing. She'd flown her whole life, owned the sky, made the impossible routine. But water didn't care about service records or medals or legends. Water just drowned you if you let it. Lucia broke surface gasping, coughing out seawater, grabbing onto floating debris while her body screamed in protest. Broken ribs made breathing agony. Something was wrong with her left arm, dislocated shoulder probably. But she was alive. Impossibly, incredibly, against all probability, she was alive. Her survival beacon was still attached to her vest, still broadcasting. Somewhere out there, people were listening, calculating her position, launching rescue helicopters or diverting surface ships. The question was whether they'd arrive before exposure killed her or enemy forces captured her. Lucia inflated her vest's flotation collar, tried to stabilize her breathing, assess her injuries in the brutal morning light. She was at least 60 miles from any landmass, in international waters but close enough to Chinese-controlled territory that her presence could spark another confrontation. The water was cold, not Arctic but cold enough that hypothermia was measured in hours. Her survival training said stay calm, conserve energy, wait for rescue. Don't swim unless rescue is visible. Don't waste heat on movement. She floated, watching clouds drift across perfect blue sky, thinking how strange it was that her last sight might be beauty instead of terror. Not what she'd expected. Then again, nothing about this mission had matched expectations. Time lost meaning, measured only by the slow rotation of sun across sky and the gradual numbing of her extremities. She might have dozed, might have hallucinated. Hard to tell when cold and shock conspired to unravel consciousness. A sound penetrated the fog, rotor blades, distant but approaching. Lucia forced her eyes open, scanned the horizon, saw nothing. The sound grew louder, definitely helicopters, but from which direction? Rescue or capture? Two aircraft appeared, flying low and fast. Lucia's heart sank as she recognized the silhouettes. Z-20s, Chinese military helicopters. They'd found her first. She was about to become an international incident, a propaganda tool, a prisoner. But then the helicopters split, taking up flanking positions, and a third aircraft appeared between them, larger, slower, unmistakably American. A Navy SH-60 Seahawk, with the same insignia she'd worn for 23 years painted on its side. The Chinese helicopters shadowed but didn't interfere as the Seahawk descended, a rescue swimmer dropping into the water beside her. Young man, maybe 25, Navy Special Warfare patches on his wetsuit. He swam to her with powerful strokes, checked her condition with professional efficiency. "Captain Vadas, I'm Petty Officer Rodriguez. We're here to bring you home, ma'am. Can you move?" "My name's not ma'am," Lucia said through chattering teeth. "And yes, I can move, slowly and painfully, but I'm mobile." Rodriguez smiled despite the situation. "Yes, Captain. Let's get you in the basket and up to the helo. Those Chinese birds are getting antsy." They hoisted her carefully, Lucia biting down on agony as broken ribs ground against each other. Inside the Seahawk, a Navy corpsman immediately started treating her. Blankets, warm fluids, pain medication. Professional, efficient, exactly what she needed. The pilot's voice came over the internal comm. "Captain, we're clear of Chinese airspace. 40 minutes to the carrier. You did good, ma'am. The SEALs got everyone out. Mission complete." Lucia closed her eyes, let relief wash over her in waves. They'd done it. Against all odds, against probability, against every simulation that said it was impossible. 12 Americans safe. Reeves alive. The mission complete. And she was alive too, which was unexpected but not unwelcome. She'd made peace with dying. Could make peace with living just as easily. The flight to the carrier passed in a morphine haze. She was vaguely aware of landing, of being transferred to medical bay, of doctors working over her with controlled urgency. Broken ribs, dislocated shoulder, hypothermia, minor internal bleeding. Nothing fatal. Everything fixable given time. When she woke fully, Reeves was sitting beside her bed, eyes red from crying, jaw set with determination. "You're an asshole," the younger woman said without preamble. "That's the first thing I need you to know. You're an asshole for ejecting me." Lucia smiled weakly, noted how are the crew. "All 12 safe. Marcus Chen's asking to meet you. His niece is flying out. And Captain Vadas," Reeves' voice broke. "Thank you for teaching me, for saving me, for showing me what it means to choose." "You would have done the same," Lucia said. "Maybe, someday, but not yet. I'm not there yet." Reeves stood, straightened her uniform. "The Admiral wants to see you when you're mobile. Something about medals and press conferences and political fallout. China's claiming we violated their airspace. State Department's claiming we didn't. You're at the center of international incident." "Tell the Admiral I'm retired," Lucia said. "Send me home. Let politicians handle politics." But she knew it wouldn't be that simple. Knew there would be debriefings and testimony, and probably more missions down the line, because once you proved you could do the impossible, people kept asking you to do it again. For now, though, she was content to lie in a hospital bed on a carrier somewhere in the Pacific. Alive against probability, mission complete, with a young pilot who'd learned more in one flight than most learned in entire careers. The general back in California would get his briefing soon, would learn what Sierra Victor Niner had done, who she was, why that patch mattered, would feel shame and respect and maybe something approaching wisdom. But that was his journey. Lucia's journey was simpler: keep flying, keep serving, keep being the person others could count on when impossible was the only option. And sometimes, impossibly, miraculously, keep surviving to fly again. Outside, the Pacific stretched vast and blue, indifferent to human drama but beautiful nonetheless. Somewhere out there, 12 Americans were heading home. A young pilot was learning to live with survivor's guilt and grateful determination. And an old legend was learning that retirement was negotiable when people needed you, that some promises echo across generations, and that patches tell true stories if you earn them honestly. Sierra Victor Niner rested and healed, preparing for whatever came next. Because legends don't retire. They just wait for the next impossible mission to prove that impossible is just a word we use before someone shows us otherwise.